Hey, Push students, this is Mr. Arimatsu with your Period 5 Khan Academy Manifest Destiny in the Mexican-American War. And we're officially transitioning over to Period 5. Period 5, in my opinion, is kind of about, it's obviously many, many different things, but you can kind of think about it as two separate kind of ideas. It's the territory gained and the issues that cause, especially about slavery as we gain territories, especially due to the Mexican-American War and the Texas Revolt, which we'll kind of cover today, in the screencast. And then also the second half would be about the actual Civil War itself. So the events leading up to the Civil War and the territory gained prior to the Civil War that kind of agitates the Civil War and pushes this issue even further, and then the Civil War. So today we're really going to focus on kind of the territory gained and the Texas Revolt, which is different than the Mexican-American War, and I'll try to give you a little preview of what you're going to be learning here in a second so that you can distinguish between both of them. All right, so getting into it, one thing that you're going to have is this thing called Manifest Destiny. It's going to show up in the Khan Academy. This is very, very famous, art piece that will be described a little bit later, and I'll cover it right now. But the person who actually coined this was John O'Sullivan. And basically, to sum it up very quickly, it's the idea that Americans, it was their God-given right to go from sea to shining sea, as a lot of times explained to it, going from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast. And in this process, it was just the belief that, and you kind of seen this process happening as we've moved westward from the East Coast and immigration, and we've consistently moved west, right? The Proclamation Line, the Ohio River Valley into the South, moving to the Midwest with the Louisiana Purchase. And now we're going to kind of complete that process, right? We're going to gain California in the Mexican-American War and most of the southern boundaries. We're going to agree with with Britain about the boundary of Oregon territory, which now is Washington, which is that straight line. Here, I'll go ahead and show it to you since I have it. But this straight line that was created between British Canada and America. All right, so it's just about the idea that we're about right here in history. Missouri has come in. You can see the dates of these states. So 1838. This hasn't become a territory well until 1907, I guess, 1861. So you're starting to see some of I really like this map. And it shows the dates of when things come in. So we're about right here. These states have been entered into the Union. Missouri's been entered into the Union, part of the Missouri Compromise, as you know. And we're really going to focus on this area right here. This is actually on my website. So it's under period 5. That's where we're at. So down here under period 5. And if you were to scroll down on my website, you get this cool little map that I have. A couple different maps to help you understand exactly what the process is that we're talking about. All right. So going back, so again, Manifest Destiny, just to analyze this cartoon, we're bringing a lot of our culture, our economy, our technology over. Again, this is a push largely by farmers. Some gold miners during the 1849 gold rush will be pushing towards California and the larger West Coast. We've already had minority religious groups push further westward. A large example of that would be the Mormons that are already settled in Utah at this time. Who are kind of like an outgrowth of the Second Great Awakening. So just covering Manifest Destiny, and if you're in art history, they're going to go into the symbolism of light over here, darkness over here, and, you can see natives and buffaloes over here being pushed kind of westward by this ongoing march of civilization, this Manifest Destiny as America comes to develop the continent from sea to shining sea. And theoretically, take the darkness and bring it into light. All right. Again, kind of already covered this, but we've already got the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, so the boundary is right here. But Mexico owns almost all of this area. They have declared independence from Spain, and because of that, they've inherited all this area that was part of New Spain, but now it's part of Mexican land. And, one thing that we're going to get into, and we're going to transition right now, is we're going to talk about two different wars or two different fights. One, you can think of a Texas revolt for independence, and they're actually going to stay independent for a while. The reason being is that presidents and Congress are really concerned about bringing another southern state in the Union without having a northern state come in to balance the power. Again, going to that Missouri Compromise, which drew that line that you can kind of see right here between North and South. All right. So what states would become free in the north and what states become slave in the south. That is going to get upset in this period. We're going to come to the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which is going to completely undo the Missouri Compromise of 1820, also known as the Compromise of 1850. So anyways, but we're going to be focusing largely on Texas. You know, kind of showing you this picture right here. Mexico, this is how it was, you know, prior to Texas's independence. And what happened was this area had largely been unsettled, had largely been unpopulated. A lot of natives in here that heard probably about Spaniards and Mexicans, but largely have been independent. Remember that Andrew Jackson has pushed most of the people from Florida into like Georgia and then later into this area called Oklahoma. Which is right above Texas. But what the Mexicans actually do, which is quite interesting, a quick little story about this, is that the Mexicans actually encourage Americans to cross the border and become Mexican citizens. And you might be asking, why would you want Americans to come over and immigrate into your country, right? Well, the idea was this, is that this area has not been developed, and these Americans are developing areas for cotton. You know, they're bringing in their understanding of agriculture, you know, and also if you're a Mexican citizen, now you might protect the boundary here, even though you might have formerly been American citizen, but as long as you know, have an oath, you come over here. So immigration was actually encouraged by the Mexican government of Mexico City to come and bring settlers over, and very similar to why the English, the French, and the Dutch brought settlers over here, right, to this new land to develop it, mercantilism, raw materials, taxes. Same thing's going to be encouraged here. They're going to encourage people to come here because if this land is developed and people are making money off of it and they're paying taxes, it's better than having nothing at all and basically being just a open land where anybody can do anything. So Texans will come in, and you're going to learn about some important ones that we have famous name, that we have cities named after. The most famous would be Austin, Texas, named after Stephen Austin. But these guys are Americans that declare Mexican citizenship by using their money, buying Mexican land, and they are selling it to American farmers as they're crossing this boundary and starting up ranching. You know, cattle raising is becoming large, and also they're bringing cotton over. This kind of becomes a little bit of an issue, though, because as they're coming over here, they are told to be citizens, but as citizens of Mexico, you know, they largely should be using the language of Spanish. They should be declaring their Catholic religion. And also another big thing was no slavery, right? And you know, if you understand anything about American history, right, the whole Catholic thing is a little bit of an issue with a lot of the United States being largely Protestants and historically Protestant. So what is happening at this time is they're coming over and they're working the land, but they're not really becoming the best Mexican citizens. So they do not really speak Spanish. They bring their slaves, even though slavery is outlawed in Mexico, and these are territories in Mexico. And they're kind of denouncing Catholicism, and they're still practicing Protestantism. And for a long time, Mexico kind of turns the other way and kind of lets them get away with it. But later, there is going to be General Santa Anna, who's kind of seen as a strong, almost like dictatorish type of president or leader of the Mexican government, is going to tell the Texans, you got to start paying taxes and start having some issues with slavery. And what is going to happen is a bunch of these guys are going to revolt for independence, right? These are not Americans. They are Mexicans, but they are claiming Texas as an independent country and territory and trying to break away from Mexico. And, you know, one of the most famous battles that you'll know about this is the Alamo, right? Where you have Davy Crockett and multiple others who are killed, right, in the Alamo. And at this time, the Texans actually do fight for independence. What is the American role in this? They're supporting it, but not directly, right? This is kind of being seen as an independent movement, but definitely there are kind of former Americans that are fighting this independence. And so ultimately, they will go ahead and succeed for independence, and the president at the time and the Congress at the time will let Texas keep its independence as actually its own country, the Lone Star Republic, for about 7 or 8 or 6 to 8 years. I forgot how long it is, which is also true of California. California came in as a bare fat republic. I don't think we were annexed for about 60 or 70 days. We're kind of our own country for about 60 or 70 days. But this goes for a few years because a lot of Congress and presidents upset about bringing Texas, as I said earlier, into the United States as a slave state and upsetting the balance of power. So later, Texas does become annexed and it gets in. And there's basically this Rio Grande area, all right? And that Mexicans say this Rio Grande area, there's like a couple different rivers in here that they use as boundaries. And the story goes that basically that this had become part of the United States. There was an American convoy that actually went into Mexican land, started a fight, and I think it was President Fillmore, I believe, but don't quote me on that, who comes up and says American blood has been spilt on American soil, right? And if you're a Mexican, you're like, no, that was actually on Mexican land. You guys illegally crossed, and these guys started a fight. But this rallies all the United States, and we get the Mexican-American War. And during the Mexican-American War, the United States is going to successfully actually go all the way down to Mexico and surround Mexico. And force the General Santana, the president at this time, to sign a treaty. And so supposedly that and historically that treaty was kind of under what we call duress, like it was forced upon them through gunpoint. Usually you sign a truce and then you do the treaty, but theoretically they kind of did this. And so a lot of I saw a couple pictures on the internet. They said this territory was seized by the United States, right? And if you're a Mexican historian from Mexico, you do see this as maybe invasion and an illegal treaty that was done and completed. But nonetheless, this is how it goes. So with that being said, we get all of this territory after the Mexican-American War. And what it was a skirmish about the boundary of Texas, who had just come in as a state, even though it was an independent country for a few years while it was successful in its revolt. So all of this territory comes in, and the question now becomes, okay, what are we going to do with it? I mean, according to the Missouri Compromise, any land to the north is going to be free, and any land to the south is going to be slave. But we're real concerned about Texas coming in as a slave state, and even more gains happening. So this is going to be an issue. One more thing that's added during the Mexican-American War on these territories is something that adds a Wilmot Proviso. And this was I don't know if it was a senator, but it was a representative of Congress who adds this into a bill, which basically bans slavery in all these new territories, right? Saying the Missouri Compromise is good for the territories up until the Mexican-American War, but after that, and what we call the Mexican Cession, all of this land that we gained in the United States, that is kind of going to be off limits for slavery. And it just frustrates the entire Congress, especially obviously the South, who wants to continue this way of life and their practice for to move on and make sure that they get representation in the future in Congress. And if this is all free states, they're going to feel that the federal government might be taking away their rights later to own slaves or other parts of their Southern way of living, right? As Khan Academy calls it, the peculiar institution of slavery, where it's kind of a moral bad, but it's an economic necessity for the South at this time. So these issues and what this territory is it's gonna thrust to slavery. So you can see the Mexican-American War kind of playing two parts of our Period 5 theme, which is the expansion of gaining land. But as we get that land, how getting this land is just going to cause issues regarding, especially with slavery, which is leading up to the Civil War. All right, guys. So we covered a little bit of these assignments and kind of talked about, the Mexican-American War and Polk. I guess it wasn't Fillmore. I guess it was Polk that did the blood. But anyways, there you go. So a little review of the Manifest Destiny and Mexican-American War as we're leading up to gaining more territory in the Civil War. All right, guys, we'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.